I'm Aaron Porras, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, Israel stands strong with the victims of yesterday's St. Petersburg terror attack. The West Bank settlement enterprise supposedly hits the proverbial wall, and a 91-year-old Holocaust survivor in Argentina officially becomes a woman. Stay tuned for the latest news in Israel. Israel is today expressing condolences to the Russian people in the aftermath of yesterday's devastating terror attack that shook St. Petersburg to the core. The homemade bomb filled with shrapnel detonated in a moving subway car, killing 11 people and wounding roughly 50. A more powerful bomb was then discovered and defused at a nearby train station. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu issued a statement soon after the attack, expressing condolences on behalf of himself and the Israeli people to Russian President Vladimir Putin and to the families of those who were murdered or wounded. He added that, quote, "The citizens of Israel stand alongside the Russian people at this difficult time," end quote. In what's become a sort of traditional display, the Tel Aviv City Hall lit up with the colors of the Russian flag and in a further sign of solidarity following the attack. An attack the kind of which Israelis are all too familiar with.
I think that the gesture of the Tel Aviv municipality, it's a really beautiful thing because here in Israel we know that kind of problems and it happens once in a while here. And I feel sorry for Russia that this terrible thing happened, and we feel sorry for them.
I think it's a very nice gesture that Tel Aviv City did for the Russian people. We experience this kind of terror attacks quite often, and we know what it feels right now for the Russian people. So we hope the Russian people will be strong and come back to the life routine very fast.
There's been no immediate claim of responsibility for the St. Petersburg explosion, but investigators believe it was perpetrated by a Kyrgyzstan-born suicide bomber in his 20s with links to radical Islamist groups banned in Russia. The blast comes after the Islamic State terror group called for attacks on Russia in retribution for its military intervention in Syria. It seems like the whole world is obsessed with Israeli settlements, but what do Israelis feel themselves? On one hand, the Jewish population in the West Bank has gone up by almost 2/3 in a decade. But on the other hand, those same numbers also reflect a drop in the overall migration rate by 1/3, leading some to speculate the enterprise may be starting to lose some of its ideological appeal. One 26-year-old kindergarten teacher's assistant recently moved to central Israeli city after living on a settlement for 5 years. Although her new home is much smaller, she has greater access to community services and says the location wasn't just for logistical reasons.
Towards the end of our stay, I started to feel uncomfortable living in a settlement because I personally don't think that building more and more settlements is going to help bring peace. In fact, I think that it will make things worse. And so I felt uncomfortable living in one at that point. And so I was able to kind of breathe the sigh of relief once I moved here.
As Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and United States President Trump continue to negotiate building limitations on the land Palestinians seek for their future state, the settlements are drawing relatively fewer people every year. Studies show that back in 2006, there were 20.1 newcomers for every 1,000 residents. In 2015, that number fell to just 6.1.
מפעל ההתנחלות נמצא בתהליכי דעיכה, מה שאומר שההיתכנות של הפיזית והמרחבית של פתרון שתי המדינות שריר וקיים. הדבר קשור להחלטה פוליטית ולא להיתכנות פיזית מרחבית.
There are now about 400,000 settlers, and this statistic shows a drop in the growth rate from about 10% in 1995 to 4% in 2015. Settler leaders acknowledge that decline, but reject any fall in popularity. They insist the downturn is due to government curbs on construction, which means there simply aren't enough homes for all the people who want to move out to these areas.
הרוח של ההתיישבות והחלוציות ולחזור לארץ ישראל ולחזור אל המקומות שבהם עם ישראל היה כל הזמן, הולך וגדל כל הזמן. יש עשרות זוגות צעירים שמאוד מאוד רוצים לחזור לגור ביישובים שלנו, לא מצליחים בגלל שיש הקפאת בנייה. הרוח הולכת ומתעצמת.
One former resident of the Ofra settlement also blames the decline on the lack of available homes.
There are very few houses available in Ofra, and naturally the prices have gone up as a result. So it's less attractive for younger couples. It was once much more attractive. That's a simple rule of economics. I think that if they were to build 50 new houses in Ofra, they would fill up as quickly as they would be, advertised.
Now, there's actually been a rise in the ultra-Orthodox Jewish sector. Religious communities in Beitar Ilit and Modi'in Ilit expanded from 10 to 30% of the total settlement population over the past 20 years. But many of these generally low-income, large families say they only live across the 1967 lines because it's less expensive and that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is not on their minds.
המגזר לא מחפש ללכת לגור באידיאולוגיה במקומות, המגזר מחפש מקומות זולים ומקומות שיהיה להם את החיי קהילה שלהם כמו שהם רוצים, אנחנו לא מחפשים חיכוכים.
The issue of Israeli building in the West Bank consumes so much of the world's attention, most people are completely shocked to find out that settlements take up less than 2% of all the land in the disputed territory. Amazing, huh? Speaking of settlements, many would like to know what's going on with the first new one in 25 years that was approved by the Israeli government just a few days ago. Well, no one's going to move in tomorrow or even this year. In fact, it's likely the new town won't be habitable until sometime around 2020. That's because there are a lot of bureaucratic and logistical procedures that have to be carried out first. The defense minister has to appoint a preparatory committee to do groundwork, like determining an exact location. It also has to work out all the aspects relating to the budget, environment, and infrastructure. Then, a zoning committee has to green-light the plan, and so does the finance ministry. The findings would then be given to the defense minister to take back to the security cabinet for even more deliberation. All of that means that it's likely to be at least a year or two before any bulldozers actually start to roll. Settler leaders say they fear the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu may intentionally draw out the process so as not to anger United States President Donald Trump, who asked Israel to hold back on building. So far, Washington seems to accept Netanyahu's position, however, that he'd already promised the new settlement before that call from the White House. The new homes are to be built for former residents of the illegal Amona outpost, which was destroyed in February under court order. With the new Trump administration in the United States, there was renewed hope among many Israelis that the JCPOA nuclear agreement with Iran would be more vigorously enforced, reevaluated, or even renegotiated. General Yossi Cooperwasser, director of the Project of Regional Middle East Development, explains why the current agreement is not good, and in the long run neither serves to protect Israel nor the rest of the world.
As long as the JCPOA is in effect, then the Iranian march towards nuclear weapons goes on. And if when the JCPOA was signed, they needed 15 years to get to the point where they can actually have the capability to produce a big arsenal of nuclear weapons within a very short period of time that is unstoppable. Today it's 13 and a half years. And this is not a lot of time at all, and they use every day in order to improve what they need in order to have this weaponry, like all these ballistic missiles testings, the ongoing activity that they probably carry out in the questions of the weaponization of the nuclear material into a bomb, and other things that the JCPOA doesn't give any response to. And in the same time, they are also working on the improved centrifuges that they will employ once the time comes according to this agreement. So as long as this agreement is in effect, the march towards the nuclear arsenal of Iran goes on. And that's something that has to be stopped. And until now, unfortunately, the Trump administration that said that on day one they're going to scrap the deal, refrain from referring to the issue of what's going to happen with this deal. And the entire attention has been given to side issues like Iranian involvement in terrorism and human rights and all of these issues, which are important by themselves, but do not touch the real and most dangerous issue.
If you could do anything, or you could have the Trump administration do anything vis-a-vis Iran, what would it be?
The first thing to be done is to tell the Iranians that we want to review this agreement and start new negotiations on the deal. We are not against the deal, but we need a deal that prevents Iran from having a nuclear weapon and does not pave the road for Iran to having a big arsenal of nuclear weapons, which is exactly the deal that the Obama administration did with Iran. And
So what could they put in that
This
deal?
was outrageous by everybody understanding.
So if they reviewed the agreement, what could they put in that would be more of an
First of all,
enforcement,
they
and why
would-
would the Iranians agree to it?
The Iranians would agree to that because the Iranians are weak. But if we wait a long time, they will be very close to the weapon. Then it will be very difficult to review the deal. So the time to review it is now. And instead of that, something that, by the way, everybody in the Trump administration was saying before the election, instead of that, we don't see any movement in this direction.
In a surprise power play, imprisoned Fatah party member and convicted terrorist Marwan Barghouti is threatening Israeli jails with a wide-scale hunger strike if Israel doesn't meet his demands. According to Barghouti, the conditions under which Palestinian security prisoners live are unreasonable. He's allegedly presented the Israeli prison services with a list of demands, primarily focused on the prisoners' freedoms. Among the items on the list are allowing 2 visit permits to family members per month instead of 1, installing public telephones in every wing, free entry to visitors under 16 years old, and the removal of security restrictions on visitations. Barghouti's supporters, who will take part in the hunger strike beginning April 17th, allegedly include all of the nearly 3,000 Fatah prisoners in Israeli detention. Fatah is the party of the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, so it's surprising that even some Hamas members will participate in the strike. Barghouti is a former leader of Fatah's Tanzim armed wing, founder of the terror group the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, and is personally responsible for orchestrating a series of murders during the Second Intifada. He's currently serving 5 life sentences for his crimes. Some Israeli drivers might feel like they're still dreaming today after waking up to find that a brand new highway had opened up overnight while they were sleeping. The newest central thoroughfare frees motorists from city traffic so they can let up on the brakes for a clear ride without a single stoplight. Route 531 is an 8.5-mile stretch of road that links up with 2 other major traffic arteries, and it connects to Route 2, along which all of the Israeli cities on the coast are situated, as well as Route 6, where travelers can cruise all the way from the Galilee in the north to the Negev Desert in the south. A few sections still under construction will be completed by next year, and ultimately, the new Trans-Israel highway system will include 11 interchanges, electric rail lines, 3 new train stations, and 36 bridges or tunnels. And you know that line, "It sounds too good to be true"? Well, it is as good as it sounds, except it all came at a very hefty price. The 10-year project is the most expensive freeway in Israeli history, running up a total cost of $1.15 billion. That's twice the original estimate. Commentators on the Israeli political scene are buzzing today following the declared comeback of one of the Israeli premier's greatest challengers. Former government minister Gideon Saar belongs to the same party as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Saar resigned from the Knesset in 2014 to spend more time with his family, but he's remained popular in the polls during his absence. While speaking at a Likud party office, Saar dramatically claimed he's coming back for the sake of the people of Israel and the state of Israel. He also says he's doing it to make sure Likud remains in power. The re-emergence of Netanyahu's most serious rival comes amid internal party conflicts and 2 police investigations which raise uncertainty over the premier's political future. The next national elections are slated for 2019, but Likud primaries are to be held next year. A Channel 2 opinion poll determined that Saar was the most popular Likud party member to potentially replace Netanyahu should the PM resign over the ongoing corruption probes against him. In the same poll, Saar was also found to have been equally as popular as Jewish Home Leader Naftali Bennett. Both Bennett and Saar, however, trailed by 7 points behind Yesh Atid's chairman, Yair Lapid. It's widely been suspected, by the way, that one of the reasons the Prime Minister recently sparked a coalition crisis over the national broadcasting station is because of Saar's wife, Geula Evan. Evan had just been named as the anchor of the flagship program at the new network, and an agreement was ultimately worked out to keep the news division at the old station, though, meaning for better or worse, it seems Geula Evan is now out of what could have been a great job. When you're feeling ill, one of the most stressful feelings is that not only do you possibly have to go to the hospital, but that the tests you may need to undergo once you're there could be expensive, invasive, and even dangerous. Well, one Israeli company focused primarily on various cancers is working to solve some of these issues. Joining me in the studio now is President and COO of Nucleic, Dr. Ofer Shapira, to tell us more about his non-invasive and revolutionary diagnostic tests. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
All right, so first of all, let's just get right into it. I understand that Nucleic has submitted 5 patents already, so how do your products work? Tell me about some of them.
Well, our products, the company itself mainly focus on non-invasive cancer detection. We work in something that's called epigenetics. In general, what we're doing, we're looking along the DNA for places that undergo changes between normal and cancerous tissues, and we build tests based on these locations into DNA. So we take liquid from the body, either urine for our bladder test or blood for our lung cancer application, and we apply our markers, which is this location in the DNA that undergo changes, and we analyze them, and based on it, we decide whether this is DNA coming from a cancerous tissue or a normal tissue.
So of your patents, I understand that you have one product that is already out, or at least has been released in the bladder EpiCheck.
Exactly.
All right, so tell me about that. When and where will it be available? What does it do?
Well, bladder EpiCheck is a test that is aimed to monitor patients that had bladder cancer, and this disease is highly recurrent. So we're looking for those patients to see if there's a recurrence of the disease. So it's aimed for patients that are monitored for recurrence. And we just received the CE mark, meaning that we can market this test in Europe. We just received it about 10 days ago. So we start selling in Europe. Yeah, thank you very much. So this is now going to be available in Europe. Actually, our salesperson is now traveling in Spain and in Netherlands trying to close deals. And this test, as I said, is for monitoring patients for recurrence of the disease. It's not for early diagnosis.
So, okay, so then my question is now, you have this technology that looks for certain markers that can differentiate, that can basically find what's different in this picture.
Right.
So does it work with any other diseases, or it's really targeted very specifically at cancer?
In principle, it can work with all types of disease or cancers that we think, but you have to attack them one by one. So we started with the bladder cancer. This is a urine-based test. Then we went to the number one cancer, which is the lung cancer. Lung cancer is the most prevalent in most of the countries and certainly most deadly one. So we build the test based on blood samples. Now, once we finish with the lung cancer, we'll continue others, because what the company has is mainly an engine to develop such tests. Give us enough normal samples and 6 samples, and we'll develop markers based on it and develop a test for that.
So, how did you get into this? This is a very specific field, it sounds like. What inspired this specific focus on cancer and this technology?
Well, the company was founded by 2 scientists that came out of the Weizmann Institute, and 2 bright guys, Dr. Wasserstrom and Dr. Frumkin. And they came up with this idea of identify those changes in the DNA. And they started it. They actually started a long time ago and thinking about forensic medicine, and then they came up for cancer. Because cancer, of course, the need is huge in the market. There's a big need for cancer detection. Secondly, cancer lends itself well to this type of testing, because cancer starts with changes in the DNA. Those changes are exactly the one that we are detecting. So we start focusing on that. We looked at the first one on the bladder cancer, thinking this is a real need in the market, and it's relatively lower hurdles to jump on to get to a test. Then we went to the tougher one, which is a lung cancer, because you take it from the blood, there's less DNA coming from the tumor in the blood. So we went to this, and now we have wonderful result on the lung as well. It's still in our lab. It's not yet out in the market, but we're getting there.
Well, again, I'd love to congratulate you on your progress so far and the coming out of the EpiCheck. And I really can't wait to see the other 4 products as they come out. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay. The case against the 18-year-old Israeli-American accused of calling in hundreds of bomb threats to Jewish community centers in the United States is progressing quietly. But in the footsteps of the teen's mother, the boy's father has just spoken up on his son's behalf. Details of the case are under gag order, but according to the father speaking under pseudonym Eli to Channel 2 News,
The 18-year-old, identified simply as M, was not acting out of malice or hatred, but rather that the motive was illness. These remarks are in line with the comments of M's mother, who said, quote, her son is not a criminal, but that he doesn't know what he's doing. According to the family's legal counsel, M, who has been diagnosed as autistic, was also suffering from a non-malignant tumor discovered in his brain. They claim it had an adverse effect on M's behavior and that he could not be held responsible for his actions. M is facing charges of extortion, making threats, publishing false information, and sowing widespread fear and panic. He lives with his family in Ashkelon, who have been essentially cleared of suspected involvement. In his interview with Channel 2, M's father said, quote, to all the Jews in America, I want to say clearly, we are very, very sorry from the bottom of our hearts. Very sorry, end quote.
ILTV wants to take this moment to congratulate a woman living in Argentina on her 91st birthday, and also to wish her Mazal Tov on her Bat Mitzvah. If that sounds a bit confusing, just listen to the following heartwarming story. ILTV's Joy Gavijon joins me in the studio with more. Joy, isn't 91 a little late to enter womanhood?
Well, first of all, it's never too late to become a woman, let's say.
Okay.
And second, I think you can obviously guess that this is not a regular, ordinary Bat Mitzvah that we're talking about.
All right, well, let's check out your story for more.
Let's check it out.
Eugenia Ungar lived in the Warsaw ghetto with her parents, two brothers, and a sister. During the Second World War, they were all imprisoned at the Nazis' Majdanek and Auschwitz death camps. Eugenia was the only member of her family to survive, and she weighed just 59 pounds when she was freed by the Soviet troops. Like many Holocaust survivors, wartime events prevented her from celebrating a Bat Mitzvah ceremony. The Jewish rite of passage into womanhood is traditionally held at the age of 12. So one synagogue just hosted the service in Buenos Aires, where Eugenia ended up after the war. They also threw her a 91 birthday party. Mrs. Ungar now has 2 sons and grandsons. She has authored 3 books about her experiences and helped to found the Buenos Aires Holocaust Museum. She often spends time speaking about the Holocaust at schools and conferences. In 2011, the city's parliament recognized her achievements and named her an outstanding personality. During a recent radio interview, Eugenia Ungar described her Bat Mitzvah as the culmination of her entire life, due to the significant role it serves in being Jewish. And that milestone was only delayed by 79 years.
The Jewish holiday of Passover has a deep history and a rich cultural tradition, but perhaps no tradition is more well known than that of eating gefilte fish. I don't remember the first time I tasted this household dish, but you can bet I started eating it pretty early in life. Well, this year, the first Passover Seder just over the horizon, one Israeli textile and art design company called Noma took the opportunity to share this video showing the magical moments that some lucky babies got to join the gefilte fish tasting club. Check it out.
The Hebrew word of the day is brought to you by the University of Haifa, Hebrew Summer Ulpan, open to everyone.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. As the Passover holiday nears, Jews everywhere are starting to chow down on the annual delicacy, gefilte fish. But if you're anything like me, you probably wondered what in the world a gefilte fish actually is. Well, that brings me to tonight's word, gefilte fish, meaning stuffed fish. Gefilte originates in Yiddish, not Hebrew, but the spongy dish's infamy has made it a household word in the Jewish community. Gefilte fish, by the way, for those who aren't familiar, is basically a fish meatball comprised of seasoned and deboned whitefish like carp or pike. It's typically served with carrot slices and spicy purple horseradish, making it a strange and yet obvious delicacy. One thing is for sure though, regardless of what you're serving on your table next week, I hope we all get to eat enough to get gefilted. Let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight should be clear and warm, yet windy with a low of 67 or 19 degrees Celsius. You can expect a heat wave tomorrow as temperatures climb and become unseasonably hot and dry, with a high of 90 or 32 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.64 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.